All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into Dyadic International. We've got a stack of articles and press releases about this biotech company, and they're doing some really cool things with a fungus. Yeah, you heard that right, a fungus, to create proteins for all sorts of applications.
It's pretty amazing how Dyadic is using this fungus to produce proteins for so many different industries. We're talking about everything from pharmaceuticals to food production.
Right, it's not just any fungus. From what I've read, this Thermophalamyces heterothalica has quite a history in industrial applications. That's got to be a big plus for Dyadic, don't you think?
Definitely. They're not starting from scratch. They're building on decades of research and proven methods for large-scale production. That gives them a real edge, especially in terms of speed and being able to scale things up quickly.
So Dyadic uses this fungus through two main platforms, C1 and Dapibus. C1 focuses on pharmaceuticals, and Dapibus is more for everything else. What makes these platforms stand out?
Well, they've basically engineered the fungus to become a super efficient protein factory. They can tailor it for different applications, using a combination of genetic engineering and what's called directed evolution, which basically guides the fungus to produce the exact proteins they need.
So they're kind of like hacking the fungus to pump out custom-made proteins. That's incredible. And their Q3 2024 financial results are pretty impressive too. Revenue shot up over 300% compared to last year.
And a big chunk of that growth came from licensing fees and hitting milestones, which tells you they're not just researching in a lab, they're actually forming partnerships, hitting targets, and turning their research into real-world stuff. It really shows they're credible and have the potential to be successful in a field that's super complex.
Okay, you've got my attention. Let's start with the Dapibus. They're calling it the animal-free alchemist, which sounds really interesting. What have they been working on with that?
One of their big achievements with Dapibus is producing animal-free recombinant albumin. That's a really important protein, used in everything from cell culture media to medical diagnostics. But traditionally, it's been sourced from human blood plasma, which has risks and limitations.
So Dyadic is creating this essential protein without using traditional animal sources. That's a win for people looking for animal-free and ethically sourced options. What other proteins are they producing with Dapibus?
They're also working on recombinant transferrin. That's essential for iron transport. And alpha-lactalbumin, a key part of breast milk. These proteins have uses in cell culture media, nutrition, and specialized medical fields. It's like they've got a whole toolbox of animal-free proteins using Dapibus.
That's impressive. But we can't forget their most talked about development, animal-free dairy enzymes. I'm really curious about the science behind that. How do you make cheese without cows?
Well, they're still developing it. But it involves engineering the fungus to produce those specific enzymes needed for cheese, basically mimicking what happens in a cow's stomach.
So instead of cows, they're using this fungus to create the same enzymes. It's mind-blowing that a fungus could revolutionize the dairy industry, and they've already hit a big milestone in this project, receiving over $400,000 for achieving target yields.
It really shows how biomanufacturing can disrupt traditional industries and create solutions that are more sustainable and ethical.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about C1. Dyadic's platform for human and animal health. This is where they're developing vaccines and therapeutics, right?
Exactly. One exciting development is their work with Virovax. They're developing a really productive Mpox antigen, which is heading into preclinical studies soon.
So they're right there on the front lines of fighting infectious diseases. But their work with C1 goes way beyond Mpox. They're also targeting other major health concerns like HIV, HPV, RSV, and other respiratory viruses.
They're working with 2 top 10 pharmaceutical companies and a leading biotech company to develop antibodies and antigens for those diseases, to create new treatments and preventative measures.
And they're not just focused on developing these solutions, they're also dedicated to making them affordable, which is huge. They recently received a $3 million grant from the Gates Foundation to develop cost-effective monoclonal antibodies, or mAbs, for RSV and malaria.
That's a big deal. To have the support of a global leader in addressing health disparities like the Gates Foundation, it shows how Dyadic's work can impact global health, especially in low and middle-income countries.
No, mAbs are notoriously expensive to produce. What are they doing differently to make them more affordable?
It's true, high mAbs costs limit access for a lot of people. But there are several promising approaches in development. One way is to increase the potency of mAbs, so smaller doses are needed to get the same effect, which would ultimately lower costs. The Gates Foundation is looking into innovative approaches like multibodies, which could increase potency by up to 10,000 times.
10,000 times? That's mind-blowing. What else are they doing to lower costs?
Researchers are also optimizing manufacturing processes and looking at alternative platforms for expression. Instead of relying on those pricey mammalian cells, they're considering using plants to produce mAbs.
Wow, using plants to create complex medications. That's thinking outside the box. But it's clear that Dyadic is really committed to finding ways to make these life-saving treatments accessible to everyone.
Their commitment to accessibility is truly commendable, especially in a field where costs are often a barrier to treatment.
So we've talked about Dapibus and C1, and it seems like Dyadic is on a roll. But before we get into the specifics of their platforms, I want to take a step back and really emphasize what's so groundbreaking about their approach. They're using a single-celled fungus to tackle major challenges in healthcare food production and beyond.
It really shows you the incredible potential of biomanufacturing and the power of using natural resources in new ways.
And they're not just innovating, they're actively working to make their solutions more affordable and accessible for everyone. It's a powerful combination that sets them apart.
Absolutely. Their focus on sustainability and global access is really inspiring. They're not just developing products, they're trying to create positive change.
Okay, I'm ready to dig deeper into the technical aspects of their platforms. What can you tell us about how C1 and Dapibus actually work?
Well, both platforms take advantage of what makes Thermothelomyces heterothalicus so special. This fungus is a protein-producing machine, and it can grow in these huge bioreactors at high densities.
That sounds good for scaling up production, but what really makes these platforms unique? Aren't there other companies out there also using fungi for this kind of thing?
Oh, for sure, there are others exploring fungal platforms. But what sets Dyadic apart is how well they understand Thermothelomyces heterothalica and their own methods for engineering and optimizing the fungus. It's like they've cracked the code and can now tailor it to make specific proteins with high yields and purity.
So it's not just about using any fungus, it's their expertise with this specific one that matters. Can you give us some technical details that highlight that expertise?
Sure thing. For example, they've come up with a way to integrate genes directly into the fundus's genome, which ensures stable and consistent protein production. They've also fine-tuned the fermentation process by optimizing conditions like temperature, pH, and nutrient levels to really maximize protein expression.
So they've built this high-performance engine, and they're constantly tweaking it for the best possible output. Can you give us a specific example of how they've used this expertise to solve a real-world problem?
Absolutely. Their work on producing recombinant human serum albumin using Dapibus is a perfect example. They've engineered the fungus to secrete this protein right into the fermentation broth, which makes purification so much easier and cheaper.
It's like the fungus is doing all the hard work, making the protein readily available. That seems like a major advantage over those traditional methods that need more complicated extraction and purification steps.
You got it. And this efficiency leads to lower production costs, which means these essential proteins become more accessible for more applications.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned Dyadic is looking into using C1 to produce affordable insulin. That's a lifesaver for millions with diabetes. But the cost can be a huge barrier. How is C1 different from the way insulin is made now, and how could it potentially bring those costs down?
Right now, most insulin is made using bacteria or yeast, and while those methods work, they have limitations in terms of how much insulin they can produce and the complexity of the insulin molecule they can make. But C1 has shown it can make complex human insulin with high accuracy and efficiency.
So C1 can make a more complex and potentially more effective type of insulin. How does that translate to savings?
Well, the higher yields and simpler production process with C1 could significantly reduce the cost of making insulin, making it more affordable for the people who need it.
That would be a game changer for so many people. It's great to see Dyadic using their technology to address such a critical global health issue. Now, I remember reading about a study that really showcased the power of C1, something about making millions of doses of monoclonal antibodies in a tiny bioreactor.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the research from UC Davis. They used Dyadic's C1 platform to produce a whopping 120 million doses of monoclonal antibodies in just a week, all in a 3-liter bioreactor, which is small enough to fit on a desk.
120 million doses in a week from a desktop-sized bioreactor. That's just incredible. It really shows you how powerful C1 is for making essential medicines quickly and at scale. It's like a mini pharmaceutical factory. But with all this innovation, are there any potential downsides or challenges Dyadic might run into?
Well, even with all the potential, they face the same challenges as any biotech company. Like the regulations for biopharmaceuticals are complex and always changing. Getting approval for new products takes a long time and costs a lot of money.
So even with groundbreaking research, there's no guarantee it'll be a smooth ride. It's a good reminder that the path from the lab to the market can be long and unpredictable. What other challenges do they face?
Competition is another big one. Biomanufacturing is booming, and there are a lot of companies fighting for a piece of the market. Dyadic has to stay ahead of the game to compete.
So it's not just about having great products, they also have to navigate a really complex and constantly changing market. Are there any other potential hurdles they might encounter?
Scaling up production to meet demand can be tricky. They've had great results in the lab. But making that work on a large scale while keeping costs down can be a real challenge.
So scaling up while keeping quality and efficiency high is key. And as they grow, they'll need to attract and keep the best people in a very competitive industry. Building a strong team will be essential for achieving their ambitious goals.
Absolutely. Having the right people is crucial in a field like this. But with their track record and dedication, I think they're well equipped to handle these challenges.
Well, it's clear that Dyadic International is a company worth watching. But before we go any further, let's quickly recap the key points for our listeners, just to make sure we're all on the same page. What are the most important things to remember about Dyadic and their approach?
The biggest takeaway is that they're using this powerful fungus, Thermothelomyces heterothalica, to create a wide range of proteins for all sorts of applications. They've developed two special platforms, C1 for pharmaceuticals and Dapibus for everything else, each designed to efficiently produce specific proteins.
And what sets them apart isn't just the fungus they're using, it's their deep understanding of the specific organism and their ability to engineer and optimize it for specific purposes. They're basically masters of turning this fungus into a protein-making machine.
Exactly. And their technology has already produced some amazing results, from animal-free proteins to affordable insulin, and even huge quantities of monoclonal antibodies.
And it's not just about the science, it's about their commitment to making these solutions affordable and available for everyone, addressing global health issues and promoting sustainability.
They've definitely caught the attention of major players, including Big Pharma and the Gates Foundation. It shows you just how impactful their innovative approach could be.
Now they do face challenges, like navigating regulations, dealing with competition, and scaling up production. But their history of success and dedication to innovation put them in a good position for the future.
They're a company to keep your eye on for sure. They're pushing the boundaries of biomanufacturing and using it to make a real difference in the world.
Okay, we've covered the main points. Let's move on to our outro and give our listeners something to think about. We've been talking about how Dyadic is using this fungus to solve specific problems. But what if we zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture? We've been focusing on the stuff Dyadic is working on right now. But what if this technology could do even more? Like, what if we think beyond these specific products and think about the platform itself as something that could really change things?
That's a really interesting thought. I mean, we've seen how well they can engineer this fungus to make very specific proteins. So could they use it to create proteins we haven't even thought of yet? Proteins that could solve totally new problems.
So instead of just focusing on what we know it can do, we start exploring what we don't know. What could this fungus make that might help us in ways we can't even imagine right now?
Exactly. It's like we're opening up this treasure chest of possibilities. Think about things like bioremediation. We could engineer fungi to clean up pollution, or make bio-based materials with all sorts of cool properties.
So we're talking about a future where this technology isn't just making proteins, it's using them to find innovative solutions to all kinds of problems.
Right. Like, what about environmental issues? What if we could engineer fungi to break down plastic waste or absorb carbon dioxide from the air? That could be a huge help in fighting climate change.
That's a future I'd love to be a part of. It's amazing and kind of humbling to think that a tiny fungus could be the answer to some of our biggest problems.
It really shows you the power of nature and how smart scientists like the ones at Dyadic are, figuring out how to unlock that potential. But this isn't just about one company or one technology.
What do you mean?
Dyadic's work is a great example of what we can do. When we think outside the box and start exploring what the natural world has to offer, it's part of this bigger trend of using biology to find solutions. And it's happening across a lot of different industries.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? It sounds like we're at the beginning of a biorevolution.
It's definitely an exciting time to be following all this. And as a listener, you can be a part of shaping this future. You can support companies like Dyadic, invest in research, and speak up for policies that encourage these kinds of sustainable and innovative solutions.
You're absolutely right. This isn't just something we watch from the sidelines. We can all be part of creating a future that's more sustainable and uses biology to solve problems.
Remember, if something as simple as a fungus can have this much power, imagine what else we can achieve if we really try.
That's a great point. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot, learned about Dyadic's amazing work, and thought about the bigger picture of what their approach could mean.
Yeah, there's always more to learn. But this has been a great way to start understanding the potential of biomanufacturing and how it might shape our future.
So to our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing the limits of what you think is possible. The future is full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to make it happen.
You never know. Maybe someday we'll be doing a deep dive on your groundbreaking discovery, all because you were inspired by this episode.
That's a great thought. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep into this amazing world we live in.
Do you want a deep dive podcast like this? Contact Bull Run by Charlie DeVanzo.